Welcome, dear traveler, to a journey through time. Find yourself a comfortable place to rest. Let your breathing slow. Let the tensions of the day begin to melt away. You are safe here, and you have nowhere else you need to be. Close your eyes if you wish, and let yourself drift back through the centuries. Imagine that time is like a vast river, and we are floating gently backward along its current. The present moment begins to fade. The sounds of the modern world grow distant, and then disappear entirely. The hum of electricity, the rumble of engines, the glow of screens, all of it receding into the future, becoming something that hasn't happened yet. We're leaving behind the noise and rush of the modern world, moving backward through history, watching it unfold in reverse. Past this year, past this decade, past this century. We drift through the 20th century with its wars and wonders, past the Victorian Age with its industry and empire, past the Enlightenment with its reason and revolution. We float through the Renaissance, past the Age of Discovery when ships sailed to new worlds. We move through the Reformation, through the printing press, through the Black Death. And still we drift backward, until we arrive in a quieter time. A simpler time, perhaps, though that word doesn't quite capture the truth of it. A different time, certainly. The Middle Ages. Not the early Middle Ages of Viking raids and Saxon kingdoms, nor the late Middle Ages of the 100 Years' War and the Wars of the Roses, but somewhere in between. The High Middle Ages, they would later call it. A time when feudalism shaped every aspect of life, when the church bells measured the hours, when most people lived and died within a few miles of where they were born. And not just any moment in those long centuries, but a particular season. Winter. The season of rest and reflection, of darkness and cold, of communities turning inward, of life slowing its pace. The season when the natural world sleeps beneath blankets of snow, and humans huddle close to their fires, telling stories, mending tools, waiting for the return of spring. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. We have arrived. It's late afternoon in December, in the year of our Lord 1347. The sky above is heavy with clouds the color of pewter and pearl. You can feel it in the air, that particular stillness that comes just before the first real snowfall of winter. The birds have gone quiet. Even the wind seems to be holding its breath. We find ourselves on the outskirts of a small village in the English countryside, somewhere in the rolling hills of what we might today call the Cotswolds, though that name wouldn't have meant much to the people who lived here. To them, this was simply home. The village had perhaps 30 families, maybe 150 souls in total, clustered around a small stone church with a square tower. The landscape around us is familiar yet foreign. The hills roll away in gentle curves, much as they do today, but the forests are thicker, darker, more present. There are no power lines cutting across the sky, no distant hum of traffic, no airplane contrails. The silence is profound in a way that's difficult for us to imagine now. When the wind dies down completely, as it has now, you can hear your own heartbeat. You can hear the rustle of your woolen cloak. You can hear the earth itself, waiting. Let's walk together down this narrow lane toward the village. The path is rutted and muddy from the autumn rains, frozen now into hard ridges that crunch softly under our leather boots. On either side of the lane, bare hedgerows stand like patient sentinels. The hawthorn and blackthorn bushes are stripped of leaves, their dark branches reaching upward like thousands of thin fingers. Here and there, you can still see a few withered berries clinging to the twigs, bright spots of red and black that the birds have somehow missed. The fields beyond the hedgerows lie fallow, resting after the harvest. Back in September and October, these same fields were alive with activity. Villagers working from dawn until dusk, cutting wheat and barley with their sickles, binding sheaves, loading carts. The harvest was decent this year, thank God. Not abundant, but enough. Enough to see the village through the winter without starvation, which was never guaranteed in these times. 3 years ago, the harvest had failed, And before that, there had been rumors of a great famine in other parts of the realm. People here remembered those hungry years with a quiet dread. But tonight, we're not thinking about hunger or hardship. Tonight, we're simply walking, observing, being present in this moment, just before the snow begins to fall. As we draw closer to the village, we begin to see signs of life. Thin trails of smoke rise from the thatched roofs of cottages, straight up into the still air. The smell reaches us next, wood smoke, certainly, but also something else. Peat perhaps, mixed with the wood. Peat cut from the boggy areas near the river, dried through the summer, and now being burned to keep the darkness and cold at bay. It's a smell that would have defined winter for everyone who lived in this time. Rich, earthy, slightly acrid. Once you've smelled peat smoke on a cold winter evening, you never forget it. The cottages themselves are small, humble structures. Most are single-room dwellings with walls made of wattle and daub, wooden frames filled in with woven sticks and plastered over with a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and sometimes dung. The roofs are thick thatch, bundled reeds or straw laid in overlapping layers to keep out the rain and snow. These roofs need to be repaired and replaced regularly, and a good thatcher was a valued craftsman in any village. We pause for a moment at the edge of the village green, a common area where the villagers' animals graze in warmer months. Now it's empty except for a few geese pecking at the frozen ground, their white feathers stark against the brown grass. The green is bordered by the church on one side and the manor house on another. The manor house is the largest building in the village by far, 2 stories tall with stone foundations and actual glass windows, a mark of real wealth in this era. This is where the lord of the manor lives, the man who owns most of the land around here and to whom the villagers owe their labor and loyalty. But we're not visiting the manor tonight. We're here among the common people, the farmers and craftsmen who make up the backbone of medieval society. Let's approach one of the cottages. As we draw near, we can hear voices inside, muffled but distinct. A woman's voice, singing softly. A child's laughter. The clink of pottery or metal. Life continuing in its eternal rhythms, regardless of season or century. Before we enter, let's take a moment to understand what winter meant to these people. For us, winter might mean turning up the thermostat, switching on electric lights, perhaps enjoying some winter sports or holiday shopping. For the people of the Middle Ages, winter was something altogether different. It was a season of darkness, cold, and isolation. A time when the work of the farm slowed but never stopped entirely. A time when communities turned inward, when families huddled together for warmth, when the hours of daylight shrank to a precious few. Winter was also a time of danger. Without modern medicine, a simple cold could become deadly. A broken bone might never heal properly. Childbirth was always perilous, but in winter, with the midwife possibly unable to reach you through deep snow, it could be even more so. Food had to be rationed carefully to last until spring. If the preserved meat ran out, if the stored grain developed mold, if the root vegetables in the cellar froze, people would go hungry. Some would die. And yet, winter was also a time of rest, relatively speaking. The frantic pace of spring planting, summer growing, and autumn harvest gave way to a slower rhythm. There was time for storytelling by the fire. Time for mending tools and clothes. Time for the small crafts that couldn't be attended to during the busier seasons. Time, even, for celebration. The 12 days of Christmas would soon be upon this village, bringing feasts and festivities that would light up the darkest part of the year. But we're not there yet. It's still early December, and the real cold hasn't set in. That's about to change. As we stand here on the village green, the first snowflake falls. You might miss it if you weren't paying attention. Just a single small flake, spiraling down from the gray sky to land on the frozen grass. Then another. And another. Within moments, the air is filled with them, thousands upon thousands of snowflakes, each one unique, each one a tiny miracle of crystalline geometry that would have seemed like magic to the people of this time. The geese on the green look up, their black eyes bright, and begin to waddle toward shelter. From inside the cottages, voices rise with excitement. Children's voices especially. The first real snow is always an event, even in a time and place where winters are harsh and snow is common. There's something primordial about it, something that touches something deep in the human spirit. The world is being transformed. Everything familiar is about to look strange and new. Let's watch as the village transforms. The thatched roofs begin to acquire a dusting of white. The muddy lanes start to disappear under a clean blanket. The bare branches of the trees in the churchyard slowly turn from dark brown to white. The world is softening, becoming muffled, becoming quiet in a new way. A door opens in one of the cottages, and a young boy runs out, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, dressed in a simple woolen tunic that reaches his knees, his legs bare despite the cold. His feet are wrapped in cloth and stuffed into rough leather shoes. He tilts his head back and opens his mouth, trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue, laughing with pure delight. A woman appears in the doorway behind him, his mother, we can assume. She's wearing a long woolen dress, covered by an apron, her hair hidden under a linen coif. She smiles at the boy's joy but calls to him to come back inside before he catches a chill. This small scene is repeated across the village. Other doors open. Other children emerge to marvel at the snow. Adults come to their doorways to look up at the sky, assessing, calculating. How heavy will this snowfall be? Will it make travel impossible? Will it last? These are practical concerns, but there's also a sense of quiet appreciation. Beauty exists even in hardship. Perhaps especially in hardship. Let's walk through the village as the snow continues to fall. Our footsteps are already leaving tracks in the thin white layer accumulating on the ground. We pass the smithy, where the blacksmith is still at work despite the late hour. Through the open door, we can see the glow of the forge, hear the ring of hammer on anvil. The smith is a broad man with powerful arms, his face smudged with soot. He's making nails, dozens and dozens of nails, a commodity always in demand. He looks up as we pass, nods a greeting, then returns to his work. The warmth from the forge spills out into the snowy air, creating a small bubble of heat. Next to the smithy is the cottage of the village alewife, a woman who brews and sells ale. In an era when water was often unsafe to drink, ale, weak, small beer as it was called, was a staple of the medieval diet. Everyone drank it, from children to the elderly. The alewife's cottage smells of fermentation, yeast, and malt. A complex, not unpleasant smell that mingles with the wood smoke and snow. We continue on, passing the church. It looms above the other buildings, its stone walls solid and reassuring. The door is wooden, thick and heavy, bound with iron. In the churchyard surrounding it, simple wooden crosses mark the graves of villagers past. Some of the graves are old, the crosses leaning at odd angles or partially collapsed. Others are newer, the wood still relatively fresh. In the corner of the churchyard, there's an area set apart. The graves of suicides and criminals, those who couldn't be buried in consecrated ground. Even in death, society enforced its hierarchies and judgments. The church bell tower rises above us, and as we look up at it through the falling snow, we hear the bell begin to toll. Not the frantic ringing that would signal fire or danger, but the measured, rhythmic tolling that marks the hour of vespers, the evening prayer. It's a sound that has structured daily life for centuries, a sound that will continue to do so for centuries to come. The bell's voice rolls out across the village and the surrounding countryside, telling everyone within earshot that day is ending, that it's time to give thanks for another day survived, another day of life. From inside the church, we can hear singing. The priest has begun the evening service, and a few of the more devout villagers have come to join him. The Latin words of the liturgy drift out into the snowy air, ancient and powerful, connecting this small village to a wider world, to Rome and Jerusalem, to centuries of tradition and faith. But most of the villagers are not in church. Most are in their cottages, preparing for the evening meal, the last meal of the day. Let's return to that first cottage we approached, where we heard the woman singing and the child laughing. We stand outside for a moment, feeling the snow collect on our shoulders, on our hair. The world is growing darker now. The sun is setting behind the thick clouds, though we can't see it. The snow seems to glow with its own faint luminescence, reflecting what little light remains in the sky. Then we duck our heads and step through the low doorway into the cottage. The interior is dim, lit only by the fire burning in the central hearth. There's no chimney as we would understand it, just a hole in the roof through which the smoke is supposed to escape. Of course, not all of it does, and the air inside is hazy, scented with wood smoke and the smell of cooking food. Your eyes adjust slowly to the darkness. The cottage is a single room, perhaps 15 feet square. The floor is packed earth, covered in places with rushes and straw for insulation and cleanliness. The walls, as we noted before, are wattle and daub, and they've been lime-washed at some point, giving them a pale color that helps reflect the firelight. From the ceiling beams hang bunches of dried herbs, thyme, sage, mint, and strings of onions and garlic. Practical and aromatic, they serve multiple purposes. The furniture is simple but functional. A rough wooden table. A few three-legged stools. A large chest against one wall, which likely holds the family's few valuable possessions and their better clothes, if they have any. In the corner, there's a raised sleeping platform, basically a wooden frame filled with straw and covered with wool blankets. This is where the family will sleep tonight, all together for warmth. The woman we saw before is crouched by the fire, stirring a pot suspended over the flames on an iron trivet. She looks up as we enter, and her face, illuminated by the firelight, is lined but not old. Perhaps 30, which would make her middle-aged by medieval standards. Her name is Agnes, though we wouldn't learn this unless we were introduced properly. She smiles briefly at us, a stranger but apparently a welcome one. Hospitality is important here, especially as winter begins. The boy who was outside is now sitting on one of the stools, swinging his legs. His hair is wet from the melted snow, plastered to his head. His mother has clearly given up the battle to keep him inside. A man sits at the table, working on something in his lap. He's perhaps 35, weathered by years of outdoor work. This is John, Agnes's husband, a farmer like most men in the village. He holds an annual tenancy on several strips of land in the common fields, which he works to support his family, and to meet his obligations to the lord of the manor. John is currently repairing a leather harness, using an awl to punch holes so he can stitch a torn strap back together. His hands move slowly but surely, the hands of someone who has spent a lifetime working with tools and materials, making do, making last, making sure. Agnes glances toward the shuttered window, then back to the fire, her movements efficient and practiced. The rhythm of domestic life continues uninterrupted, each person attending to their tasks in comfortable silence. This quiet scene tells us much about how people lived in this era. The constant work of survival, yes, but also the companionship of it. The shared labor. Each season brought its own challenges, and winter's challenge was endurance. But it was an endurance shared together, as families, as communities. The pot that Agnes is tending contains the evening meal. Let's look closer. It's a thick stew or pottage, the standard fare for most medieval peasants. The base is a dark broth, probably from a bone that's been boiled many times. In it, we can see chunks of cabbage, onions, turnips, and parsnips, root vegetables from the family's garden plot. There might be a bit of bacon or salt pork in there too, though meat is precious and used sparingly. The whole thing has been seasoned with salt, if they have it, and whatever herbs Agnes thought appropriate. Some barley or oats might have been added to thicken it. This pottage has been cooking for hours, the pot rarely leaving the fire, and it will be eaten for multiple meals. Tomorrow, Agnes will add more water, more vegetables if they have them, maybe some bread crusts, and the pot will continue. This is how most people eat, day after day. Not much variety, but sustenance. Enough to keep body and soul together. Agnes dishes out the pottage into wooden bowls, 3 of them. She hands one to John, one to the boy, her son, William, and keeps one for herself. They also have trenchers, thick slices of stale bread that serve as plates. A chunk of dark rye bread is placed on the table, and they'll break off pieces to eat with their stew and to soak up the broth. Before eating, the family pauses. John speaks a brief prayer of thanks in English, asking God's blessing on the food and expressing gratitude for the harvest and for the day past. It's simple, sincere, unrehearsed. Then they begin to eat. The cottage is growing warmer from the fire and from the body heat of the people inside. Outside, we can hear the wind beginning to pick up, and the snow is falling more heavily now. But here inside, there's warmth and food and family. The boy, William, tells a rambling story about something that happened with the village goats that day. John makes a small joke, and Agnes laughs, a sound like bells. These are people living their lives, finding moments of joy in the midst of hardship. After the meal, Agnes clears the bowls away, stacking them to be cleaned tomorrow. The fire is banked for the night, built up with larger logs that will burn slowly until morning. John finishes his work on the harness and sets it aside. Young William is already drowsy, his eyes heavy. He curls up on one of the straw mattresses, and Agnes covers him with a wool blanket. The adults will stay up a bit longer. There are always small tasks to do, always something that needs mending or preparing. Agnes sits by the fire with a distaff and spindle, spinning wool into thread. This is work that can be done in dim light, work that countless women before her have done, and countless women after her will do. The motion is rhythmic, almost meditative. Pull the wool from the distaff, twist it into thread, wind it onto the spindle. Again and again and again. The thread will eventually be woven into cloth, and the cloth will become clothing or bedding or any of a dozen other necessary things. John sits nearby, sharpening a knife on a whetstone. The sound is soft, regular. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It mingles with the sound of the fire crackling, the wind outside, the faint whistle of snow being blown against the walls. We sit with them in the firelight, letting time pass. Minutes stretch into an hour. Conversation is sparse but comfortable. They speak of everyday things. The neighbor's cow that's expected to calve soon. The need to check on Agnes's mother in the next village when the snow clears. Whether the Lord will call for extra labor this winter for some project or other. These are lives lived close to the edge, but not without comfort, not without community, not without love. It's easy for us in the modern world to look back at times like these and see only hardship, only primitiveness. But people have always been people. They've always found ways to make their lives meaningful, to find beauty in the world around them, to care for each other. Eventually, John and Agnes begin to prepare for bed. John checks the door, making sure it's secured against the wind and any animals that might try to seek shelter. Agnes visits the corner where there's a wooden bucket, the chamber pot, and then makes sure William is covered and warm. Then both adults climb onto the sleeping platform. The fire is dying down now, just glowing coals. The cottage is dark except for that faint reddish glow. Outside, the snow continues to fall, silent and steady, transforming the world. As we prepare to leave this cottage and continue our journey through the medieval winter night, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've observed. This is history, yes, but it's also human life in all its complexity. These people didn't think of themselves as living in the Middle Ages or in medieval times. They were simply living, day by day, doing their best to survive and thrive in the circumstances they found themselves in. The snow will fall all night, and by morning, the village will be blanketed in white. The work of the day will continue. Animals must be fed, water must be fetched, fires must be tended. But for now, in this moment, there is sleep. There is rest. There is peace. And there is snow, falling gentle and eternal, outside the cottage door. Let's step back outside into the winter night. The cold takes your breath for a moment after the warmth of the cottage. The snow is several inches deep now, and still falling. The village is quiet except for the wind and the soft susurration of snowflakes landing on snow. A few cottages still show light leaking through gaps in shutters or around doors, but most are dark. The people have gone to bed, sensibly, for they'll be up with the dawn regardless of the weather. We make our way back toward the village green, our footprints the only marks in the fresh snow. The church stands silent now, its vespers service long concluded. The priest is likely in his small house beside the church, perhaps reading by candlelight, perhaps sleeping. He's an educated man in a village of illiterates, a connection to the wider church and to learning. Let's pause here in the center of the village, with the snow swirling around us, and simply be present. Listen to the silence. Feel the cold on your face. Watch the snow accumulate on the cross that stands on the village green, on the well cover, on the stocks where minor criminals are punished. This is the Middle Ages, but it's also just a winter night. And winter nights, across all of history, have a certain quality to them. A quality of stillness, of rest, of the world sleeping under a blanket of snow. The snow continues to fall, gentle and persistent. The night deepens around us, and the village settles into sleep. But our journey through this medieval winter is just beginning. There are more places to visit, more lives to witness, more of this world to understand. Let us continue our walk through the snow-covered lanes, moving beyond the village center, toward the edges of this small community where other lives unfold in the winter darkness. We step back out into the winter night, leaving the warmth of Agnes and John's cottage behind. The cold embraces us immediately, but it's not an unpleasant sensation. It's bracing, clarifying, real. The snow has accumulated to perhaps half a foot now, and it continues to fall in thick, lazy flakes that seem to drift more than descend. Our path takes us away from the village center, toward the outskirts where the cottages become more scattered, where the forest presses closer. The lane we follow is barely visible now, just a slight depression in the white landscape. On either side, the hedgerows have become sculptures of snow, their intricate branch structures transformed into something abstract and beautiful. As we walk, let's consider the silence. In our modern world, true silence is rare. There's always something, the hum of a refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the buzz of electronics, the rumble of an airplane overhead. Even in the countryside, even at night, there are sounds. But here, in this medieval winter, the silence is profound. The snow absorbs sound, muffles it, softens it. The world feels wrapped in cotton, hushed, reverent. Our footsteps make soft crunching sounds in the snow. Our breath creates small clouds of vapor that dissipate quickly in the cold air. These are the only disturbances in the stillness. Even the wind has died down, as sometimes happens during heavy snowfall. The air feels suspended, waiting, as if the world itself is holding its breath. We come upon another cottage set back from the lane. This one is slightly larger than Agnes and John's, with what appears to be a small workshop attached to one side. Smoke rises from the roof, and there's a faint glow visible through the gaps around the shuttered windows. This is the home of Thomas the carpenter, one of the more skilled craftsmen in the village. Carpentry was an essential trade in medieval society. Nearly everything was made of wood: houses, furniture, tools, carts, barrels, even some of the simpler agricultural implements. A good carpenter was always in demand, and Thomas has built a modest prosperity from his skills. Not wealth, not by any means, but a certain security that many in the village lack. Let's move closer to the workshop. Through a gap in the shutters, we can see Thomas at work inside. He's a man in his 40s, broad-shouldered and strong from years of working with timber. His hair and beard are shot through with gray, and his hands, even in the dim light, show the scars and calluses of his trade. Thomas is working on a chest, a storage chest for one of the wealthier families in the village. The wood is oak, heavy and durable, and he's been working on this piece for several weeks now. Tonight, by the light of several tallow candles and the glow from a small brazier that keeps his workshop from freezing, he's fitting the lid. The work requires precision. The lid must fit snugly but not too tight. It must be aligned properly so the iron hinges will work smoothly. He works slowly, methodically, checking and rechecking his measurements with a wooden ruler marked with notches. There are no printed measuring tapes in this era, no standardized units that everyone agrees upon. A carpenter develops his own system, his own tools, his own ways of ensuring accuracy. Thomas has been doing this since he was a boy, apprenticed to his own father, learning the trade through years of observation and practice. The workshop smells of sawdust and wood shavings, a clean, pleasant smell that mingles with the smoke from the candles. Shavings litter the floor, and several partially completed projects lean against the walls. A cartwheel waiting for repair. A plow handle that cracked and needs replacing. A cradle for a new baby expected in the spring. The work is never finished. There's always something that needs building or mending. Thomas pauses in his work, stretches his back, rolls his shoulders. He's been bent over this chest for hours, and his muscles are tight. He walks to the door of the workshop and opens it, looking out at the falling snow. The cold air rushes in, and he takes a deep breath, letting it clear his head. He's considering whether to continue working or to call it a night. The chest isn't urgently needed. It's a luxury item, really, something the buyer ordered months ago and won't expect for weeks yet. But Thomas takes pride in his work, and he wants to get this part right. He decides to continue for a bit longer. Stepping back inside, he closes the door against the cold and returns to his workbench. His wife and children are asleep in the cottage portion of the building, and he works quietly so as not to disturb them. The sound of his plane smoothing wood is rhythmic, soothing. Long, steady strokes that curl off thin ribbons of oak. The wood grain reveals itself slowly, patterns of light and dark that have been growing in this tree for decades before it was felled. Let's leave Thomas to his work and continue our walk through the snowy night. We follow the lane as it curves around the edge of the village, past a small orchard where apple and pear trees stand bare and ghostly in the snow. In the warmer months, this orchard provides fruit for the village, though most of it goes to the lord of the manor as part of the villagers' obligations. Still, there are always windfalls, always a few fruits that can be gathered, and Agnes and the other village women know how to dry apples and preserve them for winter eating. Beyond the orchard, we come to the mill. It sits beside a stream that flows down from the hills, a stream that even in winter maintains enough current to turn the great wooden wheel. The wheel is silent now, locked in place for the night, but during the day it turns steadily, driving the millstones that grind grain into flour. The miller is an important figure in any medieval village, and often a controversial one. By law, all the villagers must bring their grain to the lord's mill to be ground, and they must pay for the privilege, usually a portion of the flour itself. The miller is responsible for collecting these fees, which makes him, in effect, a tax collector. Millers were often suspected of cheating, of taking more than their due, and the profession had an unsavory reputation. Whether this village's miller is honest or not, we can't say. But his mill is essential, and he lives in a sturdy house attached to the mill building, better built than most cottages in the village. The mill is dark tonight, the miller and his family long since asleep. But the sound of the water rushing past, the creak of ice forming at the edges of the stream, These are sounds that continue regardless of human activity. The stream has been here far longer than the mill, far longer than the village. It will be here long after both are gone. We cross a small wooden bridge over the stream, our feet careful on the snow-covered planks. On the other side, the path leads upward, toward the forest that borders the village lands. This is the edge of the civilized world, in a sense. Beyond this point, the forest stretches for miles, dark and deep and full of mysteries. Medieval people had a complicated relationship with forests. On one hand, the forest was a resource. It provided wood for building and burning, it provided game for hunting, it provided forage for pigs, it provided medicinal herbs and wild foods. But it was also dangerous. Wolves lived in these forests, and occasionally they would take livestock or even threaten people. Outlaws and bandits sometimes made their camps in the deep woods, away from the law. And there were older fears too, fears that went back to times before Christianity, fears of spirits and strange creatures that lived in the wild places. The forest before us is a mixture of oak, ash, and beech trees, their branches heavy with snow. In the summer, this forest would be dim even at midday, the canopy so thick that little light penetrates to the forest floor. Now, in winter, with the leaves gone, it's more open, but still forbidding. The trunks of the trees are dark against the white snow, standing like pillars in some vast, roofless cathedral. We don't venture deep into the forest tonight. That would be foolish, even dangerous. But we walk a little way along a path that the villagers use when they come to gather wood or check their snares. The forest in winter has its own sounds. The creak of branches weighted with snow. The occasional soft thump as a load of snow slides from a high branch to the ground below. The scurrying of some small creature, a hare, perhaps, or a fox, disturbed by our passage. And then we hear something else. A long, lonely howl that echoes through the trees. A wolf. Not close, probably several miles away, but close enough to hear. It's a sound that makes something primal stir in the human heart, a reminder that we are not the only predators in this world, not the only creatures trying to survive the winter. The howl fades away, and the forest returns to silence. We stand still for a moment, listening, but there are no more calls. The wolf is alone, perhaps, or perhaps its pack is too far away for us to hear their responses. Let's turn back toward the village. The forest is beautiful, mysterious, but it's not a place for humans on a winter night. We retrace our steps, back across the bridge, past the silent mill, back toward the warmth and safety of human habitation. As we walk, let's think about what the night would have meant to medieval people. Without electric lights, without even reliable candles for most people, night was truly dark. When the sun went down, most work had to stop. Oh, there were tasks that could be done by firelight, spinning, as Agnes was doing, or mending, or Thomas's carpentry if he could spare the candles. But for the most part, night meant rest. It meant sleep. It meant the world shrinking down to the small circle of light cast by a fire or a single candle. This darkness shaped how people thought and felt. Night was when ghosts walked, when demons were abroad, when the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead grew thin. Night was when you stayed inside, when you barred your door, when you huddled close to those you loved. And yet night was also peaceful. It was a time of rest, genuinely rest, when the demands of the day could be set aside. We find ourselves back on the village green. The snow is deeper now, perhaps 8 or 9 inches, and it shows no sign of stopping. Every surface is covered, transformed. The well in the center of the green is just a mound of white. The stalks are barely visible. The church, though, stands out. Its stone walls are too vertical for the snow to cling to, and it rises dark and solid against the white landscape. Let's approach the church more closely. The building is several centuries old, built in the Norman style with thick walls, small windows, and rounded arches. It's been added to over the years, a side chapel here, a new door there. But the basic structure is ancient, built by people long dead, people whose names are forgotten but whose work endures. The church door is locked, of course. No one would leave a church open at night, not with its valuable furnishings, the silver candlesticks, the embroidered altar cloths, the illuminated Bible that represents years of a monk's labor. But if we could step inside, we would find a space that's cold and echoing, and yet somehow comforting. The smell of incense would linger in the air from the evening service. The stone walls would be decorated with painted scenes from the Bible, a last judgment over the chancel arch, perhaps, showing the saved ascending to heaven and the damned descending to hell. These paintings would be vivid, colorful, meant to teach and inspire in an age when most people couldn't read. The church is the center of village life in ways that might be hard for us to understand. It's where you're baptized as an infant. It's where you marry. It's where you're buried. It's where you hear the word of God and learn your place in the grand scheme of creation. It's where you celebrate the great festivals of the year, Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, and all the saints' days in between. It's where the community gathers, where rich and poor stand together, at least in theory, as equals before God. But the church is also a reminder of hierarchy. The lord of the manor has his own special pew, carved and cushioned. The priest, as an educated man and representative of the church, has a status above the common villagers. The church's teachings support the social order, telling the poor to accept their lot and the rich to be charitable. It's a complicated institution, offering both comfort and control. We walk around the side of the church through the graveyard. The headstones here are simple, most just rough stones with no inscriptions. A few of the more recent ones have names carved into them, but carved by local hands, crude and hard to read. The people buried here lived and died in obscurity, their stories known only to their families and neighbors, and soon forgotten even by them. But here's an interesting thing. Near the back of the graveyard, there's a stone that's different from the others. It's older, much older, and it's covered with strange carvings that don't look Christian at all. They look older, pagan perhaps. This stone was here before the church, before the village, part of some ancient monument whose purpose is now lost to memory. The church builders incorporated it into their graveyard, perhaps not even knowing what it was, perhaps Christianizing it by its mere presence in consecrated ground. This layering of history, this palimpsest of beliefs and cultures, is everywhere if you know how to look for it. The Christian Middle Ages were built on top of the Roman world, which was built on top of the Celtic and Germanic tribal societies, which were built on cultures even older. And traces of all these layers remain, hidden in plain sight. The snow continues to fall. We're quite cold now, even in our warm medieval clothing. It's time to seek shelter again, to find warmth and perhaps something hot to drink. There's one building in the village we haven't visited yet, and that's the manor house. Let's approach it now, crossing the green toward the largest structure in the village. The manor house is impressive by local standards, though it would seem modest to us. It's built of stone on the ground floor, with timber framing and plaster on the second story. The roof is slate, not thatch, more expensive, but more durable and fire-resistant. There are several chimneys, which means several fireplaces, a luxury that most villagers can't afford. And there are those glass windows we mentioned earlier, small panes of greenish glass held together with lead, distorting the view but letting in light. The manor house is home to Sir Geoffrey, the local lord, and his household. Sir Geoffrey holds his lands from a baron, who holds his from an earl, who holds his from the king. This is the feudal system, a pyramid of obligations and loyalties stretching from the lowest serf to the monarch himself. Sir Geoffrey is not a great nobleman by any means. He controls just this one village and the surrounding lands. But within his small domain, he is the law, the judge, the military commander, the ultimate authority. Tonight, the manor house is mostly dark, but there's light coming from one window on the ground floor, the great hall, probably. Let's move closer, quiet as the falling snow, and peer through one of those greenish glass panes. Inside, the great hall is a long room with a high ceiling supported by dark wooden beams. A fire burns in a large fireplace at one end, and several candles provide additional light. The walls are hung with tapestries, both for decoration and for insulation against the cold. The floor is covered with rushes, changed regularly and strewn with herbs to keep them sweet-smelling. Sir Geoffrey is there, sitting near the fire in a carved wooden chair, almost a throne, really. He's a man in his late 50s, gray-haired and gray-bearded, dressed in good wool with fur trim. Not the ermine and silk of a great lord, but far finer than anything the villagers wear. He's drinking wine from a pewter cup, and there's a small table beside him with a jug and a plate of food, cold meat, cheese and bread. The remains of his evening meal. With him is his wife, Lady Eleanor, a woman perhaps 10 years younger, still handsome, dressed in a long gown of deep blue wool with a white linen wimple covering her hair. She's working on an embroidery, holding it close to the candlelight to see the stitches. The embroidery is fine work, far beyond the simple mending that Agnes does. This is art, meant to decorate an altar cloth for the church, perhaps, or a cushion for the chapel in the manor house. There are a few servants moving quietly in the background. A boy adds wood to the fire. A woman clears away dishes. They move like shadows, trained to be unobtrusive, to anticipate needs without being asked. This is their life, service to the manor, and in return they receive food, shelter, and protection. It's not so different from the arrangement the villagers have with Sir Geoffrey, really. Service in exchange for security. Labor in exchange for the right to live and work on his land. Sir Geoffrey and Lady Eleanor are talking, their voices too low for us to hear through the window. They might be discussing estate business, which fields to plant with what crops in the spring, which tenants are behind on their obligations, whether to invest in new equipment for the mill. Or they might be discussing news from beyond the village. Sir Geoffrey occasionally travels to the nearest town, or even to the castle of his own lord, and he brings back reports of the wider world. Perhaps there's news of the king, or of troubles on the border with Scotland, or of the latest political maneuvering among the great nobles. But probably on a night like this, they're just talking about small things. Family matters. The health of their son, who's away being fostered in another noble household, learning the skills he'll need when he inherits his father's position. The upcoming Christmas celebrations. Whether the snow will be a problem for travel. They are people, in the end, much like Agnes and John and Thomas. Their lives are more comfortable, certainly. They have better food, warmer clothes, more secure shelter. They don't have to do back-breaking physical labor every day. But they also have their worries and responsibilities. The weight of leadership, such as it is. The need to maintain their position, to fulfill their obligations to their own lord, to manage their lands wisely so they can continue to support themselves and their dependents. The social distance between Sir Geoffrey and his villagers is vast, much greater than any economic divide in our modern world. But the human experiences, love, fear, hope, loss, these are universal, unchanged across centuries and social classes. We step back from the window, leaving the lord and lady to their evening. The snow is falling harder now, if anything. The wind is picking up again, blowing the snow into drifts against walls and hedges. It's becoming difficult to see more than a few yards ahead. This is turning into a proper storm. Let's make our way back toward the center of the village, toward shelter. As we walk, struggling a bit against the wind now, we can see that a few doors have opened. People are looking out, assessing the storm, perhaps worried about livestock or outbuildings. But there's not much to be done tonight. The animals are sheltered as well as they can be. The buildings will stand or fall regardless of human worry. Sometimes, all you can do is wait and endure. We find ourselves back near Agnes and John's cottage. The door opens as we approach, and Agnes herself appears, wrapped in a heavy cloak. She's checking on something in a small lean-to attached to the side of the cottage. We follow her gaze and see 2 goats huddled together for warmth, and a few chickens roosting on a low beam. The family's livestock, precious resources that must be protected. Agnes tosses them some hay, checks their water. It's already freezing, and she breaks the ice with her fist, and then hurries back inside. We could follow her back into the warmth, but instead, let's take shelter in a different location. There's a barn on the edge of the village, a communal building where the village stores some of its hay, and where animals can shelter during the worst weather. Let's make our way there through the blowing snow. The barn is not locked. It's too large and too full of relatively low-value items to be worth securing tightly. We push open the large wooden door and step inside, pulling it closed behind us against the wind. The interior of the barn is dark and surprisingly warm, heated by the body warmth of the animals sheltered here. There are several cows, their large eyes gleaming in the darkness, chewing their cud with slow, steady movements. There are more goats, a few pigs in a pen, and many chickens roosting in the rafters above. The smell is powerful, animal bodies, manure, hay, and straw all mixed together. It's not unpleasant, really, just very strong. It's the smell of life, of survival. We find a place to sit on some bales of hay, and we simply rest for a while, listening to the storm outside and the quiet sounds of the animals around us. This is a peaceful place, in its way. The animals don't worry about the future or regret the past. They simply are, living in the eternal present, concerned only with warmth and food and safety. Time passes. The storm continues. Outside, the snow must be getting quite deep now, perhaps a foot or more. Tomorrow, the village will wake to a transformed world, and the work of digging out will begin. But that's tomorrow. Tonight there is only the storm, the darkness, and the quiet breathing of animals in a barn. Let us rest here for a while. Let the sound of the wind and the warmth of the hay lull us into a state of peaceful drowsiness. The medieval winter night continues around us, but here, in this moment, we are safe and still. We drift in and out of sleep in the warmth of the barn, surrounded by the gentle sounds of animals settling for the night. Time becomes fluid here, unmeasured except by the gradual quieting of the storm outside. The wind that howled and rattled the barn doors begins to diminish. The sound of snow pelting against the wooden walls grows softer, then stops altogether. The storm is passing, moving on to blanket other villages, other fields, other forests. In the deep hours of the night, when even the chickens have stopped their occasional rustling, there is a profound stillness. This is the heart of winter, the darkest part of the year, when the sun seems to have abandoned the earth and the cold settles in with the permanence of stone. But even in this darkness, there is life. The cows breathe their slow, steady breaths. The pigs shift in their straw. A mouse scurries along a beam, searching for fallen grain. Life persists. Life endures. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the darkness begins to change. Not lightning exactly, not yet, but thinning somehow. The black of deep night shifts to charcoal, then to gray. Through the gaps in the barn walls, through the spaces around the door, a different quality of light begins to seep in. Dawn is coming. Let us step outside to greet it. We push open the barn door carefully, quietly, and emerge into a transformed world. The snow has stopped. The clouds have broken apart, and are drifting away to the east, revealing a sky that transitions from deep purple to pale rose to the faintest gold along the horizon. Stars still visible in the western sky are beginning to fade. The moon, 3/4 full, hangs low and luminous, casting shadows across the snow. And the snow itself. It lies everywhere, deep and pristine and untouched. The village has vanished beneath it, or rather, has been reimagined. The cottages are rounded mounds with smoke holes. The church stands like a snow-covered mountain. The trees are laden with white, their branches drooping under the weight. Every fence post wears a tall white hat. Every surface has been smoothed and softened and unified into one continuous landscape of white. The silence is extraordinary. The kind of silence that only comes after heavy snowfall, when every sound is absorbed and muffled, when the world seems wrapped in cotton. Our footsteps, as we begin to walk through the deep snow, make soft crunching sounds that seem almost sacrilegious in this quiet. The sun is rising now, still hidden behind the hills to the east, but sending its light ahead as a herald. The sky brightens from gold to yellow to a pale, clear blue. The snow begins to glow, reflecting this light, amplifying it, until the whole world seems luminous. Shadows stretch long and blue across the white landscape. The frozen surface of the snow sparkles with thousands of tiny ice crystals, like diamonds scattered carelessly across the earth. It is breathtakingly beautiful. Even the people of the Middle Ages, who lived so close to nature, who saw such sights every winter, must have paused to marvel at moments like this. Beauty is not a luxury or an indulgence. It is fundamental to the human spirit. It reminds us that there is more to existence than mere survival. As the light increases, the village begins to wake. The first door to open is at the cottage of old Walter, the oldest man in the village, a widower who lives alone. He emerges wrapped in layers of wool and fur, his breath creating clouds in the frigid air. He looks at the snow, nods to himself as if confirming something he already knew, and begins the work of clearing a path from his door to the lane. He uses a wooden shovel, broad and flat, pushing the snow to either side. It is hard work, even for someone much younger than Walter's 70-some years, but he moves with the steady patience of someone who has done such work countless times before. There is no hurry. The snow will be there whether he rushes or takes his time. Better to work steadily and avoid exhausting himself. Other doors begin to open. John emerges from his cottage, followed shortly by young William, who immediately begins playing in the snow despite his mother's calls to come help with the chores. Agnes appears in the doorway, shaking her head at her son's antics but smiling nonetheless. She has wrapped herself in a heavy shawl, and she carries a wooden bucket. She needs to fetch water from the well, assuming it hasn't frozen solid overnight. Thomas the carpenter appears, stretching his back and surveying the snow with a craftsman's eye. He'll need to check his workshop, make sure no snow has gotten inside to damage his wood or tools. And he'll need to clear paths, both for himself and for the neighbors who might need his help. The village priest, Father Anselm, emerges from his small house beside the church. He's a thin man in his 40s, with an ascetic face and gentle eyes. He's already dressed in his black robes, prepared for the morning service even though he knows few villagers will brave the snow to attend. Still, the work of the church must continue regardless of weather. He rings the church bell for prime, the first canonical hour, though the sound is oddly muted by the snow-covered landscape. Slowly, the village comes to life. Smoke begins to rise from more chimneys as fires are built up and breakfast is prepared. The sound of shoveling snow, of chickens being let out of coops, of goats bleating, of people calling to one another, these sounds gradually fill the air, pushing back against the silence. Let us follow Agnes as she makes her way to the well. The path is difficult, the snow deep, and she has to lift her skirts high to avoid them getting soaked. The well is at the center of the village green, and several other women are already there, or making their way there. The well is a gathering place, a place where news is shared and gossip exchanged, where the work of maintaining the community happens in small, informal ways. The well itself is covered with a wooden roof to protect it from debris, and someone, probably Walter, who's always up earliest, has already swept the snow from around it. Agnes nods to the other women, sets down her bucket, and begins to lower the rope. The bucket descends into the darkness, and there's a distant splash as it hits the water far below. She hauls it back up, hand over hand, the weight of the water making her arms strain. The bucket emerges, brimming with cold, clear water, and she carefully pours it into her own bucket before lowering the well bucket again for the next person. One of the other women at the well is Margaret, the wife of the village reeve. The reeve is a position of some importance. He's responsible for organizing the villagers' labor obligations to the Lord, for keeping track of who owes what, for settling minor disputes. Margaret's husband is essentially the intermediary between the common villagers and the manor, and this gives Margaret a certain status among the women. Margaret is talking about the storm, about how deep the snow is, about how this will delay certain work that needs doing. But her tone is not complaining, exactly. It's more factual, assessing. This is the reality they all face, and there's no point in wishing it were otherwise. The conversation moves on to other topics. Someone's daughter is betrothed to a young man from the next village over. Someone else's cow is expected to calf any day now. The normal currents of village life flow on, channeled but not stopped by the snow. Agnes fills her bucket and begins the careful journey back to her cottage. Water is heavy, and the bucket is full, and the snow makes every step uncertain. She moves slowly, concentrating on not spilling. Water is too precious to waste, especially in winter when the well might freeze and make fetching it even more difficult. Back at the cottage, John has cleared a path to the small lean-to where they keep their goats and chickens. He's checking on the animals, making sure they survive the night, that none have gotten sick or injured. The goats are fine, hungry and vocal about it, but fine. The chickens are ruffled and cranky but alive. He gives them feed, grain that was carefully stored away from the harvest, and breaks the ice on their water. Young William is supposed to be helping, but he's been distracted by the snow. He's attempting to build something, rolling snow into balls, stacking them. It's not quite a snowman as we would recognize it. That tradition hasn't fully developed yet, but it's clear he's trying to make some kind of figure. His hands are red with cold, but he doesn't seem to notice or care. This is the magic of childhood, the ability to find joy and play even in harsh circumstances. Agnes calls to him again, more firmly this time, and he reluctantly abandons his snow creation to help his mother carry water inside. Together, they navigate the cleared path back to the cottage, where the fire is burning warm and breakfast is waiting. Breakfast in a medieval peasant household is a simple affair. Some of yesterday's bread, perhaps softened in ale or in a bit of milk if they have it. Some of the pottage from last night, reheated over the fire. Maybe a bit of cheese. It's not much, but it's warm and filling, and it gives them the energy they need for the day's work. The work, even in deep winter, never truly stops. There are animals to tend, water to fetch, paths to clear, repairs to make. John will need to check the roof of the cottage, make sure the weight of the snow hasn't damaged the thatch. He'll need to check the storage shed where they keep their small supply of grain, make sure it's still secure against mice and damp. He'll need to walk to the common fields and check on the few sheep that belong to the village collectively, make sure none are trapped or injured. Agnes has her own work. Spinning, always spinning. The distaff and spindle are never far from her hands. She also needs to bake bread, a task that happens every few days. The dough was prepared last night, left to rise slowly in the warmth near the fire, and now it needs to be shaped and baked. They don't have their own oven. Ovens are expensive to build and maintain, so Agnes will take the shaped loaves to the communal village oven, which is tended by another woman who makes a small income from the service. But before all that, there's a moment of rest. A moment to sit by the fire, to eat breakfast, to warm hands and feet, to gather strength for the day ahead. The family sits together in their small cottage, the fire crackling, the snow outside creating a strange, diffused light through the gaps around the shutters. They are together, they are warm, they are fed. For this moment, that is enough. Let us step back outside and explore more of the village in the morning light. The sun has fully risen now, though it hangs low in the southern sky. It's December, and even at noon the sun will never climb very high. The days are short, the nights long, and this imbalance will continue for another few weeks until the winter solstice passes and the slow return of the light begins. We walk toward the manor house, where activity is already well underway. Sir Geoffrey's household is larger and more complex than those of the villagers, and there's more work to be done. Servants are clearing snow from the courtyard, from the stables where Sir Geoffrey's horses are kept, from the path to the kitchen building which stands separate from the main house to reduce the risk of fire. The kitchen is already busy. The cook, a stout woman named Marjorie, and her assistants are preparing the day's meals. The manor household eats better and more regularly than the villagers, with meat more often, with better bread, with spices and wines that the common people never taste. This morning, there's a haunch of venison roasting over the fire, meat from a deer that Sir Geoffrey's huntsman brought down a few days ago. There are eggs, the manor keeps many chickens, and fresh bread, and small beer to wash it all down. Lady Eleanor emerges from the manor house, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak. She's going to the chapel, a small building attached to the manor, for her morning prayers. She's a pious woman, and she tries to attend services regularly, unlike many nobles who treat religion as mere formality. The chapel is cold, unheated, and her breath forms clouds as she kneels before the small altar and recites her prayers in Latin, words she's memorized even if she doesn't fully understand their meaning. Sir Geoffrey himself is in the stables, checking on his horses. Horses are valuable, status symbols as much as practical necessities, and he takes their care seriously. His destrier, his war horse, is a massive animal that costs more than most villagers will see in a lifetime. The horse is groomed daily, fed the best hay and grain, exercised regularly. Right now, though, with the snow so deep, exercise will be difficult. The horse shifts restlessly in its stall, sensing its master's presence, hoping for activity. The manor lands stretch beyond the village itself, encompassing fields and forests and streams. Sir Geoffrey's wealth, such as it is, comes from these lands and from the labor of the people who work them. The feudal contract is clear. The villagers work the lord's land and their own strips in the common fields. They pay various fees and taxes. They provide labor when called upon. In return, Sir Geoffrey provides protection, administers justice, and in theory at least, ensures that his people don't starve. It's not an equal relationship by any modern measure, but it's the system that has evolved over centuries, and it provides a certain stability, a certain predictability. Everyone knows their place, their role, their obligations. There is comfort in that, even if there is also injustice. Let us walk beyond the manor, out to where the common fields lie under their blanket of snow. These fields are divided into long, narrow strips, each strip worked by a different family. The system is called strip farming, and it ensures that everyone has some good land and some poor land, some that's easy to work and some that's difficult. It's a way of distributing both opportunity and hardship fairly across the community. Right now, the fields are empty and dormant. The wheat was harvested months ago, the stubble plowed under. Some fields are lying fallow, resting, recovering their fertility. Others were planted with winter wheat or rye in the autumn, and the young plants are sleeping under the snow, waiting for spring to resume their growth. Standing here in the middle of these fields, with the village a cluster of snow-covered buildings in the distance, and the forest a dark line on the horizon, we can feel the immensity of the landscape, the smallness of human settlement within it. Medieval people lived close to the land in ways we can barely imagine. They knew every field, every tree, every stream. They knew which plants were edible and which were poisonous, when to plant and when to harvest, how to read the weather and the clouds and the behavior of animals. They were not naive or simple, these medieval peasants. They were sophisticated observers of the natural world, experts in the knowledge that mattered for their survival. They couldn't read Latin texts or understand complex theology, but they could read the land, and that was a different kind of literacy, equally valuable in its context. A figure appears in the distance, trudging through the snow toward us. As it draws nearer, we see it's a young man, perhaps 18 or 20, dressed in rough clothing and carrying a long staff. This is Edmund, one of the village shepherds. He's been out since before dawn, checking on the sheep that were left in a distant pasture when the snow began. He looks tired and cold, but his expression is one of relief. The sheep are safe, huddled together in a natural hollow that gave them some shelter from the worst of the storm. Edmund nods to us as he passes, continuing toward the village where warmth and food await him. His work is done for the morning, but he'll be back out in a few hours, making his rounds again, the endless cycle of tending and watching and protecting. We follow him back toward the village, our own feet beginning to feel the cold despite our warm boots. The sun is higher now, though still low, and the day has reached what passes for full light in a winter morning. The village is fully awake and active. Children are playing in the snow, their laughter ringing clear in the cold air. Adults are going about their work, calling to one another, helping neighbors clear particularly deep drifts. There's a sense of community here that might be hard for us to understand in our modern world of individualism and privacy. These people live in each other's pockets. They know everyone's business, for better or worse. They rely on each other in ways that are both comforting and constraining. When someone's roof leaks, neighbors help repair it. When someone falls ill, others bring food and tend to their animals. But there's also no escape from judgment, from gossip, from the weight of communal expectation. The church bell rings again, terse, the third hour, mid-morning. Some of the villagers pause in their work, cross themselves, murmur a brief prayer. Others don't, continuing with whatever task occupies them. Religion in this era is complex, a mixture of deep faith and casual observance, of sincere devotion and mere habit. The church is the only church, the only option, so everyone is Christian by default. But what that Christianity means to each individual person varies enormously. Father Anselm emerges from the church and begins making his rounds through the village. This is part of his pastoral duty, checking on his flock, seeing if anyone needs spiritual guidance or practical help. He stops at old Walter's cottage and exchanges a few words. He visits a family where the wife recently gave birth, offering a blessing for the new baby. He checks on a man who was injured in a farming accident weeks ago, who is slowly recovering but still can't work. The priest is a bridge between the earthly and the divine, at least in theory. He administers the sacraments that mark the stages of life. He offers the comfort of ritual and the hope of salvation. But he's also just a man, with his own doubts and struggles, trying to do good in a world that is often harsh and unforgiving. As mid-morning approaches, we find ourselves back near the center of the village. The initial flurry of activity after the snow has settled into a steadier rhythm. Paths are cleared, animals are tended, the basic necessities are secured. Now people can turn to other tasks, the ongoing work of life that continues regardless of season or weather. Let us visit the cottage of Beatrice, the village herb wife and healer. Her cottage is on the edge of the village, near the forest, which is fitting given that many of her remedies come from plants gathered in the woods. Beatrice is a woman in her 50s, weathered and strong, with capable hands and sharp eyes. She knows more about the healing properties of plants than anyone else in the village, knowledge passed down from her mother and grandmother, knowledge accumulated over generations of observation and experience. We enter her cottage and find it different from the others we visited. The smell is distinctive, not unpleasant, but complex and medicinal. Bunches of dried herbs hang from every available space on the ceiling and walls. Sage, thyme, lavender, mint, chamomile, yarrow, feverfew, and dozens of others. Some we might recognize, others are obscure, their uses known only to specialists like Beatrice. She has a visitor this morning, a young mother holding a toddler who is clearly unwell. The child is feverish, fretful, coughing. The mother looks worried, as any mother would be. Infant and child mortality in this era is terrifyingly high. Many children don't survive their first year, and those who do still face constant dangers from disease and accident. Beatrice examines the child carefully, feeling the forehead, listening to the cough, looking at the tongue and eyes. She asks questions about when the illness began, what symptoms appeared first, whether the child is eating and drinking. Then she turns to her stores of remedies. She prepares a tisane, a medicinal tea, combining several dried herbs in a small pot. She adds hot water from the kettle that always hangs over her fire and lets it steep. While it's steeping, she prepares a poultice, crushing certain leaves and mixing them with a bit of fat to create a paste that can be applied to the child's chest to ease the cough. She gives instructions to the mother carefully. The child should drink the tisane 3 times a day. The poultice should be applied morning and evening. The child should be kept warm but not overheated. If the fever worsens, if the cough changes in character, the mother should come back immediately. The mother thanks Beatrice profusely and asks what payment is required. Beatrice considers. She knows this family is not wealthy. She accepts a small amount, a few eggs perhaps, or the promise of help with her garden in the spring. This is how village economics often work, not in coin but in exchange, in mutual obligation, in the web of relationships that holds the community together. The mother leaves with her sick child, and Beatrice returns to her work. She's restocking her supplies, checking what she has and what she'll need to gather when the weather improves. Some plants can only be collected at certain times of year, and a healer must plan ahead, must maintain her stores carefully. Beatrice occupies an interesting position in the village. She's valued, even essential, but also slightly suspect. Healing, especially healing done by women using plant lore, exists in an ambiguous space between acceptable and dangerous. In a few decades, in the late Middle Ages and early modern period, women like Beatrice will sometimes be accused of witchcraft. For now, in this time and place, she's mostly left alone, her skills too valuable to risk losing. But she's always aware of being watched, of the need to be careful, to avoid giving offense to the church or to powerful neighbors. We leave Beatrice to her work and step back out into the midday light. The sun has reached its highest point, though that's not very high at all. The shadows are short, the light bright but cold, casting everything in sharp relief. The village is settling into the afternoon now. Some people have returned to their cottages for a midday meal. Others continue working, taking advantage of the light while it lasts. In a few hours, darkness will begin to fall again, and the cycle will continue, day after day, through the long winter months. Let us make our way to one final location before this segment of our journey ends. There's a spot at the top of a low hill just outside the village, a place where the land rises just enough to provide a view of the surrounding countryside. Let us climb this hill, our legs tired from walking through the deep snow, but drawn by the promise of perspective. From the top of the hill, we can see for miles. The village lies below us, a small cluster of buildings sending up threads of smoke. Beyond it, the patchwork of fields stretches out, all white now, but we can imagine them in other seasons, green with growing crops, gold with ripe grain, brown with freshly turned earth. Beyond the fields, the forest extends to the horizon, dark and dense, punctuated here and there by clearings and streams. In the far distance, we can just make out another village, or perhaps it's just a curl of smoke that marks human habitation. The world is dotted with such places, each one isolated yet connected by narrow roads and shared faith, and the vast feudal structure that binds them all together. We stand here on the hilltop, the wind cold on our faces, and we think about the lives we've witnessed. The nobility in their manor, the peasants in their cottages, the priest in his church, the healer with her herbs. Each playing their role in a society that is rigid yet functional, harsh yet capable of great beauty and kindness. The winter will continue for months yet. There will be harder times ahead, days when the cold is so bitter that water freezes indoors, when food runs low and hunger gnaws, when sickness spreads through the village and claims lives. But there will also be moments of joy. The Christmas celebrations will bring feasting and light into the darkest days. Spring will eventually arrive, bringing warmth and renewal. Life will continue its eternal cycle. For now, in this moment, we stand on the hilltop and simply observe. The medieval world spreads out before us, foreign yet familiar, distant yet immediate. These people are separated from us by centuries, by technology, by worldview, but they are still recognizably human. They love and fear and hope and dream. They find beauty in their world. They care for one another. They endure. The sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, and we know that darkness will come early, as it always does in winter. But for now, there is light. There is the crystalline beauty of snow and sky. There is the quiet satisfaction of work done and challenges met. Let us descend from the hilltop and return to the village, where fires burn warm and evening approaches, and the eternal rhythms of medieval life continue unbroken. We descend from the hilltop as the afternoon light begins to soften and fade. The shadows grow longer, stretching across the snow like reaching fingers. The temperature, which never climbed very high even at midday, begins to drop again. We can feel the cold settling in, that particular bite that comes with approaching dusk in deep winter. Our path takes us back through the fields toward the village. The snow that seemed so pristine this morning now bears the marks of the day's activity. Footprints crisscross everywhere. Paths have been trampled down between cottages, to the well, to the church, to the common buildings. In places where people have been working, the snow is churned and dirty, mixed with mud and straw. But beyond these areas of human activity, the snow remains untouched, pure, glowing faintly in the fading light. As we approach the village, we can hear the sounds of evening beginning. The lowing of cattle being brought in from pasture. The bleating of goats being secured for the night. The calls of mothers summoning children who have been playing in the snow all day and must now come inside before the darkness falls completely. These are sounds that have echoed across this landscape for generations, sounds that will continue long after everyone currently living has passed into memory, and then into forgetting. Let us stop at the edge of the village and watch as the transition from day to night unfolds. It happens slowly at first, then seems to accelerate. The blue sky fades to gray, then to a deeper blue-gray that hints at the indigo to come. The first stars begin to appear in the east, faint at first, then growing brighter as the sky darkens. Venus hangs brilliant above the western horizon, the evening star, a beacon that has guided travelers and marked time since humans first looked up at the heavens. One by one, the cottages begin to glow from within as fires are built up for the evening. Thin lines of light appear around shuttered windows and beneath doors. The smoke from chimneys and roof holes becomes visible again, dark against the darkening sky, carrying the smell of burning wood and peat across the village. We make our way to Thomas the carpenter's workshop. Through the window, we can see he's still at work, or perhaps he's returned to work after the midday break. The chest he was working on last night is nearly complete now. He's attaching the iron hinges, working carefully with small nails and a hammer, making sure everything is aligned properly. This is detail work, requiring concentration and good light, and he's positioned his work near several candles to illuminate it properly. His wife, Alice, appears in the doorway that connects the workshop to their living quarters. She says something to him, likely asking when he'll be finished, when he'll come in for supper. He looks up, considers the work remaining, responds. She nods and disappears back inside. This small domestic exchange, repeated in countless households across countless centuries, speaks to the fundamental patterns of human life. Work and rest, solitude and companionship, the individual task and the family bond. Thomas continues working for another quarter hour, then finally sets down his tools. The chest is finished, or as finished as it will be tonight. He'll give it a final inspection tomorrow in better light, perhaps apply some beeswax to seal and protect the wood, but the main work is complete. He's satisfied with it. The joints are tight, the lid fits well, the hinges are secure. It's good work, work he can be proud of. He extinguishes the candles, carefully pinching out each flame and setting them aside to be used again. Candles are expensive, made from tallow or beeswax, and they're not wasted. Then he makes his way into the living quarters, where his family awaits. Alice has prepared supper, much like the supper in Agnes and John's cottage. Pottage, bread, perhaps a bit of salted fish since this is Friday and the church forbids meat. The family gathers around their table, Thomas and Alice and their 3 children, ranging in age from 5 to 12. They say grace, thanking God for the food and for the day safely passed. Then they eat, the simple act of sharing a meal binding them together, as surely as blood and vows. The conversation around the table is quiet but warm. The oldest child, a boy named Robert, talks about helping clear snow from the church path today, about how Father Anselm praised his work. The middle child, a girl named Emma, shares news from her friend whose mother recently had a new baby. The youngest, little Stephen, is mostly quiet, tired from playing in the snow all day, his eyelids already drooping even as he chews his bread. After supper, the family settles into the evening routine. Alice clears away the meal and begins preparing dough for tomorrow's bread, kneading it rhythmically, working it until it's smooth and elastic. Robert sits near the fire, practicing his letters on a wax tablet. Thomas is teaching him to read and write, unusual for someone of their class, but Thomas believes education has value. The boy is bright and eager to learn. Emma helps her mother with small tasks, fetching things, tidying up. She's at the age where she's learning women's work, absorbing through observation and practice the skills she'll need when she has her own household to manage. Young Stephen has already fallen asleep on the sleeping platform, curled up like a cat, one hand tucked under his cheek. Thomas sits in his chair, mending a tear in his work tunic, the needle moving surely through the heavy fabric. The firelight flickers across the scene, creating a tableau of domestic peace that could be from any era, any place where families gather at the end of the day. Let us leave them to their evening and venture back out into the growing darkness. The temperature has dropped significantly now. Our breath forms thick clouds, and the exposed skin on our faces tingles with cold. The snow crunches differently under our feet, the surface freezing hard as the temperature plummets. The village is settling in for the night, but not everyone is inside yet. We see a figure moving through the darkness, carrying a lantern that casts a small circle of golden light. It's the village beadle, making his rounds, checking that all is well, that no fires have been left unattended, that the animals are secured. He's an old man, granted this position partly as a form of charity, a way to ensure he has income in his declining years. He takes his duty seriously, moving from building to building, his lantern bobbing in the darkness like a firefly. We follow at a distance as he makes his way to the church. Father Anselm is there, as he often is in the evening, keeping vigil, praying in the cold darkness. The beadle checks the church door, nods to himself, and continues on his rounds. Everything is secure. The village is safe for another night. Let us enter the church, stepping through the heavy wooden door into the dimly lit interior. A few candles burn near the altar, their flames steady in the still air. Father Anselm kneels before the altar, his lips moving in silent prayer. We don't disturb him, but settle ourselves in one of the back pews, rough wooden benches worn smooth by generations of worshippers. The church is cold, colder even than outside it seems, the stone walls holding and magnifying the chill. But there's something peaceful about this space, something that transcends the physical discomfort. This is a place set apart from the everyday world, a threshold between earth and heaven, between time and eternity. For all the Church's failings, for all the ways it has been used to control and oppress, it has also been a source of genuine comfort and meaning for countless people across the centuries. We sit in the quiet darkness and simply breathe, letting the peace of the place settle over us. Time becomes elastic again, unmeasured. Minutes could be passing, or hours. It doesn't matter. We are present in this moment, in this place, connected across the centuries to all the other souls who have sat in similar churches on similar winter nights, seeking solace, seeking meaning, seeking connection to something greater than themselves. Eventually, Father Anselm rises from his prayers. He sees us sitting there and nods, a gesture of acknowledgement and blessing. He's not surprised to find someone in the church at this hour. People come and go, seeking quiet, seeking refuge, seeking God. He doesn't ask questions, just offers that simple nod, and then goes about extinguishing most of the candles, leaving just one burning as the eternal light, the symbol of God's constant presence. We rise and make our way back outside. The night is fully dark now, the kind of darkness that's difficult for modern people to comprehend. Without streetlights, without the glow of cities on the horizon, without even the moon tonight as clouds have rolled back in, the darkness is absolute. The only light comes from the cottages, faint and flickering, and from the stars overhead where the clouds haven't obscured them. We make our way carefully through the village, following the trampled paths more by feel than by sight. We're heading back to Agnes and John's cottage, drawn by the promise of warmth and light. Inside the cottage, the family is preparing for bed. The fire has been banked for the night, built up with larger logs that will burn slowly until morning. The pottage pot has been moved to the edge of the hearth, where it will simmer gently all night, ready for the morning meal. John has checked the door one last time, making sure it's secure. Agnes has laid out sleeping pallets for them all. Young William is already asleep, exhausted from his day of playing in the snow. Agnes tucks a blanket around him, her movements gentle, maternal. John sits on the edge of the sleeping platform, removing his outer layer of clothing, preparing for bed. Agnes joins him, and they settle together under the wool blankets. But before sleep comes, they talk quietly, their voices barely audible. John mentions needing to check on the sheep tomorrow, to make sure none have wandered off or gotten into trouble. Agnes talks about needing to spin more thread, about a tear in William's tunic that needs mending. These are the small details of life, the mundane concerns that make up the bulk of human existence in any era. Then Agnes mentions something else. She thinks she might be pregnant again. She's not certain yet, but there are signs. John is silent for a moment, processing this news. Another child would be both a blessing and a burden. Another mouth to feed, but also another pair of hands to help with the work, and in their old age, another person to care for them. He reaches out in the darkness and takes her hand, squeezes it gently. They'll face whatever comes together, as they always have. The conversation fades. Their breathing slows and deepens. Sleep claims them, and the cottage falls silent except for the crackle of the fire and the whisper of wind around the walls. Let us step outside one last time and walk through the sleeping village. Every cottage is dark now, or nearly so. The fires burn low. The people sleep. Even the animals have settled for the night, their barn warm with their collective body heat. We make our way back to the village green and stand there in the darkness, snow beneath our feet, stars above our heads. This is the medieval world at rest. Hard work awaits tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The winter will continue for months more. Spring will eventually come, bringing its own labors and challenges. Summer will blaze and fade. Autumn will bring harvest, and then winter will return again. The cycle is eternal, unchanging, like the turning of the heavens themselves. But within that cycle, there are these moments. Moments of peace. Moments of beauty. Moments of human connection and love. Agnes and John holding hands in the darkness. Thomas teaching his son to read. Beatrice healing a sick child. Father Anselm keeping vigil. These moments matter. They're what make the hardship bearable, what make life worth living. The snow begins to fall again, gently this time, just a few flakes drifting down from the clouds. The world is being renewed, covered once more in white, all the marks of the day's activity slowly disappearing under a fresh layer. By morning, it will look untouched again, pristine and perfect, ready for another day of living and working and enduring. Let us find shelter one last time. There's a small alcove near the church, a covered space where travelers sometimes sleep when they pass through the village. It's out of the wind, dry, protected. We settle ourselves there, wrapping our cloaks around us, using our packs as pillows. The night deepens around us. The village sleeps. The snow falls. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, the same patterns that guided the Romans and the Celts and the peoples who came before them, the same patterns that will guide humanity for millennia to come. We drift towards sleep, lulled by the profound quiet, by the cold that's somehow not uncomfortable now that we're sheltered, by the sense of being held in time, suspended between past and future and an eternal present. As we drift, let us reflect on what we've witnessed. This journey through a medieval winter has shown us a world that's both alien and familiar. The material conditions are vastly different from our own. No electricity, no modern medicine, no easy comfort. Life was harder in almost every measurable way. Yet the people themselves, the essential human experiences, these remain constant. People in the 14th century loved and grieved, hoped and feared, found joy in simple things and worried about the future. They took pride in their work and found meaning in their relationships. They looked at the snow falling and found it beautiful. They gathered around fires and told stories. They cared for their children and their elders. They helped their neighbors. They endured. We are not so different from them, despite the centuries and technology that separate us. We are connected by our shared humanity, by the universal experiences of birth and death, love and loss, work and rest. Understanding this connection, feeling it, is perhaps one of the greatest gifts that history can offer us. The medieval world was not a simple or romantic place. It was hard and often cruel, marked by inequality and suffering that we would find intolerable today. But it was also a world of great beauty, of strong communities, of deep faith and meaning. Like all human worlds, it was complex and contradictory, capable of both terrible cruelty and extraordinary kindness. As we lie here in the darkness, warm enough, safe enough, we can appreciate both the distance and the closeness. We can be grateful for the progress humanity has made, in medicine, in technology, in expanding circles of compassion and justice. But we can also learn from the past, from the ways these medieval people lived in closer harmony with natural rhythms, from their strong sense of community, from their ability to find meaning and beauty even in hardship. The snow continues to fall, soft and persistent. The world is being transformed once again, made new, given another chance. Every snowfall is a kind of resurrection, covering the old and worn and used with a blanket of pure white possibility. Our eyelids grow heavy. The cold is receding, or perhaps we're just growing accustomed to it. Our breathing slows. The boundary between waking and sleeping becomes blurred. In the distance, we hear the church bell toll. Compline, the final service of the day, the prayers that mark the transition from evening to night. Father Anselm, faithful to his duties, ringing the bell even though few will hear it, even though most are already asleep. The sound rings out across the snow-covered village, across the white fields, across the dark forest, fading slowly into the silence. And then there is only silence. Deep, profound, restful silence. The silence of a winter night in a medieval village. The silence of snow falling on snow. The silence of the earth sleeping beneath its white blanket. The silence of human lives paused in rest, gathering strength for another day. Sleep comes for us, gentle and inevitable. Our consciousness fades. The medieval world recedes, becoming dream, becoming memory, becoming story. But the village remains. In our imagination, it will always remain. Agnes and John in their cottage, their hands clasped in the darkness. Thomas and his family around their fire. The priest in his prayers. The snow falling eternal and quiet. A moment captured and held, a window into lives lived long ago, lives that matter, lives that connect to our own across the vast river of time. The winter night continues. The snow falls. The stars wheel overhead. The earth turns on its axis, bringing the distant promise of morning, of spring, of renewal. But that is tomorrow's story. Tonight there is only rest. Only peace. Only the quiet breathing of a sleeping world. Let yourself drift now. Let the centuries carry you gently forward, back to your own time, your own place. But carry with you this memory, this glimpse of another way of living, another way of being human. Carry with you the peace of falling snow and the warmth of fires shared. Carry with you the knowledge that humans have endured winter for thousands of years, that they've found beauty and meaning and community even in the hardest seasons. The medieval winter wraps around you like a blanket. The darkness is soft. The cold is distant. There is only warmth and quiet and the gentle pull of sleep. The journey is complete. The story is told. But stories never really end, do they? They echo forward through time, touching hearts, shaping thoughts, connecting past to present to future. Somewhere in England, if you traveled there tomorrow, you might find a village not unlike the one we visited. The cottages would be different, the people would live in different ways, but the church might still stand, the hills would still roll, the streams would still flow. The land remembers, even if the people forget. And on winter nights when the snow falls, when the world grows quiet and still, perhaps something of that medieval peace still lingers. Perhaps the boundary between then and now grows thin. Perhaps all the winter nights across all the centuries exist simultaneously, layered on top of each other like the pages of a vast book. Rest now in that knowledge. Rest in the peace of winter. Rest in the continuity of human experience, the endless cycle of seasons and lives and stories. The snow falls. The world sleeps. And you, dear traveler, can sleep too. Your journey through the medieval winter is complete, but the winter itself continues, as it always has, as it always will, eternal and unchanging in its cycling through time. Sleep well. Dream of snow and firelight, of villages and forests, of lives lived simply and fully, of the great river of time that connects us all. Sleep in peace. The winter night holds you gently. And the snow continues to fall, soft and endless, covering the world in white silence.